Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends and participants. Welcome to this session of Islam for Youth series. As you would all be remembering, that we have started off a module some sessions ago, which relates to moral behavior, personality development, and becoming better individuals in our lives. So we have been discussing various values and various qualities and traits which we should possess. And I have also been pointing this out that as far as the Quran is concerned, you'll find that all these moral values that it aspires or it cherishes, all of them, about all of them, it says that these are ingrained in human nature. So, as far as moral behavior is concerned, this is something which is already found in our own nature, I would say, and our conscience is the best judge of these human values. So, sympathy, kindness, humility, selflessness, justice, truth. Whenever the Quran talks about these values, the purpose is not to point out for the first time what they are, because the Quran says that these are already known to human beings at their very inception, and God has been kind enough to let us know what they are before even He sent any divine revelation. So, when the Quran speaks of these values, it is not that it is pointing them out for the first time, but the purpose, more often than not, is to remind people that they have to uphold these values, to remind them that one day they'll be responsible and they'll be held accountable before the Almighty for these values which they possess. And therefore, it is in our own well being that we become sensitive to these values, that we are more and more people who practice these values, and therefore, as human beings, we are at par with certain standards. And these standards, as we can clearly see, are standards which are common to all mankind, whether they believe in God or they don't believe in God. Such is the nature of their commonality, such is the nature of this human bond and this humanity which is found in all human beings, that you cannot even try to and find out any difference in these values. So, such is the all pervasive nature of them. So, today also we'll be discussing a value or a trait, a personality trait, which the Almighty wants that we as human beings have in us. In fact, I can say, out of my own humble opinion, that perhaps this is one of the greatest qualities that a human being can have. And that, of course, is, as you might be knowing, humility. So, humility is our topic today. Humility is going to be discussed today. And humility, of course, is something in which we recognize who we are. And the opposite of humility, obviously, is arrogance or pride or being conceited or thinking oneself to be superior from others. And at times, it is always good to know something through its opposite. So, if you understand what arrogance is all about, if you understand what conceit is all about, you can clearly see that the value that we'll be discussing today is the complete opposite of that, and that, in one word, is called humility. And as I said, the Quran discusses humility not as a means to bring it to our notice, but just to remind it at how important a trait it is. So let me start off by discussing this value which we call humility, and also, as I said, at the same time, make this point that as far as humility is concerned, we need to become more sensitive towards it. We need to sensitize ourselves as much as we can, because this is how we are able to function best as far as human beings are concerned. This is something that should come to us naturally. But what happens is that in the society that we live in, similarly, the prejudices that we may have, the biases that we may carry, they influence this trait. And of course, it needs to be revised and it needs to be improved. So today we're going to talk about humility and also discuss how we can improve this trait, we can improve our understanding of humility, and also at the same time, how this is going to help us in nurturing ourselves and strengthening, I would say. The exact word is strengthening the bond of humanity by understanding the fact that as far as humanity is concerned, this is something that we have to understand at all costs, because this is how we would be able to link ourselves with the rest of mankind in a very effective way. So let me start off by mentioning how the Quran, in certain cases or in certain instances, has mentioned this trait. So I'll first read out this verse before, or these verses before you. This is Surah number 25 and verses 63 and 65. The verses say, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ إِنَّ عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا. A translation of these verses would be, and the servants of the Most Merciful are those who walk humbly on the earth. And when people overcome by emotions talk to them, they say, peace. And who spend their nights before their Lord, prostrating and standing, and who keep praying, our Lord, protect us from the punishment of hell. Indeed, its punishment is ever clinging. So you see, my dear friends and participants, that the thing which this verse or these verses actually refer to at the onset or the foremost is that as far as human beings are concerned, the biggest quality of a human being is that he is a humble person. He or she is a humble person, and just as this humility can be gauged from a lot of things that he does, from his conversation, from the way he or she would dress. Uh, Similarly, one important area from which you can judge a person's humility, or at least have some idea about it, is how you walk. So if your gait, if the way you walk is something which reflects that you are a person who knows that who knows his or her own position, and who does not pose himself or herself to be a person who has superiority or conceit in himself or herself, then the foremost manifestation of this feeling would be that when you walk, you'll walk in a manner in which the every person who would notice you in your walk, in your gait, would be that this person is a person who is a God-fearing person, who is a humble person, who is a person who does not think himself or herself to be superior. So the bottom line is that as far as humility is concerned, it should of course start off in one's heart. I mean, it's a feeling which starts off from within us, and then it extends outside us. And as I said, our own conversation, the way we deal with people, the way we talk to people, the way we walk, as this verse also says, the way we would conduct ourselves, all this shows our humility and how down to earth we are. So it's basically being down to earth, it's basically realizing that there are other people who might be better than us. Because you see, what happens is that when you become a person, or when we become a person who is overcome by conceit and arrogance, the first effect of this is that you start regarding other people as inferior to you. And therefore, this is what happens when you look upon other people as if they are lesser human beings. So this is a sign that we have to be very watchful about, because there are at times subtle ways in which we behave in that way. At times they are much more blunt. This behavior is much more blunt, and we can detect that. But at times this is very subtle, and you have to be careful that never in your conversation or the way in you walk does this element creep in. And then another thing which is mentioned as a result is that these are the people, إِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا, when they engage with people who are overcome with frenzy, who are angry, or who are overwhelmed with emotions, they do not reply back. They don't entangle themselves with such people. They don't get into a never-ending sequence of conversation, because what happens is when a person in frenzy speaks to you, your immediate reaction is to talk back, and your immediate reaction is to behave in the same way or even in a more harsh way. On the other hand, people who are humble, people who acknowledge this fact, they are not ones who would like to engage in such conversation. They'll just withdraw. And the word that the Quran has used is qalu salama. They'll just say peace, say assalamu alaikum, which means that they'll gracefully withdraw from from that place, and instead of talking back, instead of showing a reaction, they would simply smile back and say, well, this is not my area in which I should reply to such a person. Because when a person is angry, or when a person is in frenzy, you cannot simply stop that person, or you cannot talk sense into that person unless that frenzy has died away. And then the verse says another thing. It says, وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا, that the quality of such people is that they spend their nights prostrating and standing before the Almighty, praying to Him, acknowledging their sins if they have committed them, asking for forgiveness from the Almighty, showing remorse, showing the fact that you would like to become a better person the next day. The humility found in themselves makes them confess the wrongs that they have. They don't become brave, or they don't have the audacity to become brave on their mistakes, and they would not adhere to these mistakes, but immediately they realize that something has gone wrong, and therefore we must try to make amends. For this, they ask for God's forgiveness, and of course, in areas when in which they have offended other people, not only do they ask for God's forgiveness, but they apologize to that person and make amends also, because this is not sufficient. And my dear participants and my dear friends, Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan, is just around the corner. And one of the beauties of this month is that you get up early in the night, or early in the morning, I can say, just before dawn, and you have your sahri or your suhoor in which you eat. And another thing that you can do is you can pray the tahajjud prayer. The witr, of course, is the tahajjud prayer. If you leave out those witrs that you read with the Isha prayer, you can offer them at this sahri time, because we have been told in the Quran that this is the time in which the Almighty focuses his attention towards His people the most. And if you ask from Him, if you pray to Him, if you supplicate, this is the time when the Almighty is attentive the most, and there is a chance that your prayer will be accepted. So the fact that Ramadan is just around the corner is another incentive for us, that we get up early whenever we have that sehri, and we take out 5 or 10 more minutes, that in which, besides consumption of our sehri, we are able to offer that prayer. Although this is something which is not specific to Ramadan, this is something which we can do all the year round. But in Ramadan, what happens is that you get up specially to eat your sehri, and therefore you always have the opportunity to pray to God at that time. And furthermore, the verse says, وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ إِنَّ عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا. And these are the people who pray at this time at night, and they say, Lord, protect us from the punishment of hell. Indeed, its punishment is ever clinging. Of course, implying the fact that if we have done certain things which are incorrect, certain moral aberrations maybe, or we have been deviant in our behavior, then of course we need to realize this, make amends, come back to our own normal self. And for this, of course, we would like God to forgive us, and we would like to call upon God that we are willing to make amends, we are willing to change ourselves, and therefore please help us. So you see, this is how humility has been mentioned in the Quran, that as servants of the Almighty, as creatures of the Almighty, we have to walk humbly, we have to talk humbly, we have to dress up humbly. And of course, we can clearly see that there are a lot of things which become status symbols. For example, a certain type of car, or a certain type of dress, or a certain type of cell phone, or a certain type of shoe, maybe anything. So if you have to be humble, then perhaps it is best to avoid such status symbols, because when you use a status symbol, of course, this is something which has the potential of creating that pride and that conceit and arrogance in ourselves, which, as we have just studied, is best avoided or should be avoided. Okay, folks, let's now move on to another Quranic verse which says that this humility, of course, at times can be produced if it is not found, or if we don't realize that we have to behave humbly, then there are other arrangements which the Almighty has done to make ourselves humble. And that is, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمَمٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ فَأَخَذْنَاهُمْ بِالْبَأْصَاءِ وَالضَّرَّاعِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَضَرَّعُونَ. Before you also, of course, the Quran is addressing the times of or the Arabs of the times of Prophet Muhammad, and it is telling them that before them also, I mean, the Almighty says that before you also, we had sent forth our messengers to many previous nations, and they rejected them. They rejected these messengers. So what happened was that the Almighty afflicted them with calamities and misfortunes so that they might show humility. So the philosophy of these calamities, the philosophy of these adversities that we face, can thereby be explained. And one of them is that we are able to have this feeling of self-evaluation and soul-searching, and have that humility which might have become latent, which might be sleeping in ourselves. We would like to awaken it. And the Almighty at times sends these calamities, earthquakes and cyclones and tsunamis and so many other things, which are these natural disasters. Of course, there are other reasons as well, but one of the reasons which the Quran mentions is to make a person realize, and to make a person, to awaken a person from the slumber of his arrogance. Because a lot of time what happens is that people become arrogant, people become, they start to think superior of themselves. And I think that a very clear example, we are just facing that very clear example since the past 1 year, and this pandemic that all of us are facing. All of that pandemic, of course, has had its toll. Of course, it could be regarded as a blessing in disguise as well, because it has set right a number of things, and at the same time, it has made us realize how weak we are and how meek we are before a virus which is not even living. So again, the purpose is to make that realization, to make us realize and make us feel that we should not think too much of ourselves. As I said earlier on, that arrogance is the opposite of humility. And if you want, or if we want to create humility in us, we have to do away with this arrogance. And the way the Almighty at times creates this awareness in us of humility and making us forget about this arrogance, is that He sends these calamities, and these calamities make us realize how weak we are and how helpless we are before the Almighty. So, as I said, that it is in our interest to realize that all these calamities and all these things that we face, which make us dejected, which make us so unhappy, let's start by actually telling us that there is a silver lining in these dark clouds. There is this blessing in disguise which is present, and that is that there is a certain objective behind these. And one of these objectives, as this verse is to make us realize and give up any arrogance and any conceit and pride that we might be overcome with. In other verses of the Quran, I would like to present, I think this is the last of the verses before we go on to certain comprehension questions. So it says, وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا لِيَذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ مَا رَزَقَهُم مِّن بَهِيمَةِ الْأَنْعَامِ فَإِلَٰهُكُمْ إِلَٰهٌ وَاحِدٌ فَلَهُ أَسْلِمُوا وَبَشِّرِ الْمُخْبِتِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَالصَّابِرِينَ عَلَىٰ مَا أَصَابَهُمْ وَالْمُقِيمِ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. So a translation of these verses is, for each community we have regarded the worship of sacrifice to be a religious ritual, so that whatever cattle God has given them, they pronounce God's name on it and of none else. So your God is one. then surrender yourselves to Him alone and bow down before Him only and give glad tidings, O Prophet, to those whose hearts are bent down before Him. So the word humble, of course, is here the translation is bent down, again signifying your humility. So you have to be humble before the Almighty. They are those whose hearts tremble when the name of God is mentioned before them. They are steadfast on any calamity that comes their way and are diligent in their prayer and who spend in our cause and from whatever we have blessed them with. So you can see that this set of verses actually basically tells us that as far as human beings are concerned, it is in our own interest to acknowledge God. And if we have that conceit and arrogance still in ourselves, it is simply as if we are playing the role of God, because to think a great of oneself is can only be done by someone who is actually great, who actually has this trait, and only God has this trait. So therefore, if we realize that we are humble human beings, then look what the verse says, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُخْبِتِينَ, then give glad tidings to people whose hearts are bent down. And who are they? الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. They are people who tremble when the name of God is mentioned before them. Now, the word tremble here, of course, doesn't mean that they have a certain fear of the Almighty, the way we have fear of people who would like to subdue us or subjugate us. No, the element here is that they are ones who tremble in the mention of God because they would like to behave themselves not as they are themselves deities or gods, but as themselves they are human beings in themselves. And therefore, when God is mentioned before them, that realize that as far as superiority is concerned, this is only the property of God. And as far as we human beings are concerned, superiority or arrogance is something that we have to do away with. And then it says, وَالصَّابِرِينَ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَهُم. They are the ones who are steadfast on any calamity that comes their way. So when we are humble, we have this humility in us. We are given these glad tidings. Then another thing which the Quran says here is that they are ones who bear all these calamities which come their way, because they are meant to discipline them. They are meant to produce this humility in them. And of course, they also adhere to the prayer, and at the same time, they spend from what God has given them, which in other words means that they are charitable, they are generous people. Not only do they connect to God through the prayer, but at the same time, they are people who spend from the money that they have. And any adversity that comes along their way, any calamity, any hardship, they are steadfast on that calamity, because they think that it has come to make them stronger. And humility is something, as you can clearly see, if that is engendered in a person, if that is found in a person, he or she becomes more brave, he or she becomes more acceptable, more submissive. And at the same time, it's not the fact that he or she gives up, but the thing is that the person becomes more brave, he or she has more perseverance for the cause of God. So now, my dear friends and participants, in the light of these three verses, or these set of verses that we have just studied, let's talk about certain comprehension questions. And the first of these comprehension questions is that I would like you all to participate in this small discussion. And the first of these discussions would revolve around this question, this first question. And that first question is: enumerate instances in which we do not show humility. So, of course, there are several instances in which we do not show humility. And as individuals, of course, all of us should be knowing this. So, okay, over to you, Mariam, if you could please take over from here and see how our participants would like to participate in this discussion.
So the first raised hand is from Ali Qureshi. Please go ahead.
When someone in an argument talks back.
Okay, so when we talk back in a harsh way, or we argue with someone, of course, that is something which is against humility. Yes, correct, Ali. Thank you for that.
The next person in line is Douglas Marr.
Sometimes I find that when I'm working in a team on a project with a group of people, I might tend to take control or take charge an inordinate amount, or particularly in my earlier years. I think I've gotten a bit better at that. So I don't know how to summarize this. Maybe just being overbearing, sort of taking charge of other people.
Right. So, of course, overbearing or imposing oneself, or maybe controlling too much and not letting other people play their role. This, at times, uh, of course, it is as a manifestation of the fact that you would like to have things done your own way. So, yes, thank you for that, Douglas. Okay, do we have?
We don't have currently more raised hands, but I was wondering, like, for example, when I present, I feel like I need to get rid of humility so I can put like a confident presentation.
Of course, that is correct.
So, like, is that bad?
Uh, say it again. I mean, when you're presenting, you feel that a good presentation at times evokes these emotions of pride. Is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm saying, like, when you present and you want to sound confident, then you don't want to show much humility, because then people will think that you're not confident about your science, or you're not confident about what you're saying.
So what you do is that you pose yourself to be overconfident or confident, whereas maybe inside you're a different person. I think, well, this could be a subtle thing which could go both ways, and it should not always be counted as anti-humility, I would say, because you see, to present oneself, if one is feeling jittery from inside, or one is feeling any lack of confidence, at times this artificial posture or this artificial effort has to be adopted so that a person becomes more confident. So I would say that it depends how you use it, and I would not classify it as an anti-humility, anti-humble behavior, unless, of course, if it has certain other elements to it, which, of course, our own conscience can also tell us.
And we have a bunch of things in the chat, and Mehrina said just had her hand raised.
Okay, Mehreen, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say fishing for compliments, but Meher said it, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the chat.
Okay, in the chat. Okay, Meru, what did you say in the chat?
I said fishing for compliments. So like when you're you show off and you expect people to compliment you.
Wow, that's nice. So you see, you boast yourselves, or you would like to pose yourself that you did something, and the reason would be that you'd like people to praise you, and of course that is something which is of course not a very not something which is unbecoming, and certainly against humility. So Meru, thank you very much. This is much appreciated.
Alina Sahel said, taking credit for other people's work in a project just because you're the team leader.
Obviously, so when you're the team leader, of course, it's part of humility that whenever you do something, the credit should be given to the team as well. In fact, humility would actually require that you give more credit to the team, even if you've done more yourself, and let other people grow. Because what happens is when you place credit on other people, they grow also. Because encouragement is one thing which can really work wonders, and that is when you place this or you distribute the credit of your achievement with others and share it with others. It always has a very, very morale boosting effect, I would say.
Manahil Na'man said, showing off your success to others to try and make them feel as if you're superior to them.
Right. So this is something which Meheru, I think, has indicated. So this is something close to what she has already said. Yes, Manahil, of course, that is correct as well.
And Mehrina said bragging as well.
Right. So Mehrina, absolutely correct. Okay, I have made a short list myself as well. Let me share my list with you is regarding anti-humility, or something which goes against humility. So one thing which I have written is that when you make fun of others, so this is, of course, making fun of others actually is done mostly when you feel yourself to be superior than others. and you mostly make fun of people who are not able to return that fun against you, and they are at times they are younger to you maybe, or not in a position to return the compliment. So I think making fun should be abstained from. To have a good jest, I mean, to laugh about, to do it all in good faith, of course, that's something else. But when you start making fun and when you mock at people, the intention there is to humiliate them, to disgrace them. I think such things should be avoided, in which the purpose is it's not just fun, but it's actually to damage their self-esteem. Just another thing which we do in our conversations, which is of course which is against humility, is that we don't let other people speak. So when we are sitting in a group, I think it has to be that we let other people speak, and at the same time we speak at our turn. So what happens is that we find a couple of people or maybe one person dominating that discussion, and just as some other person would like to express what she or he has in the mind, the other person would again not let that person speak. So I think that's another very essential thing. It's a very impolite thing to do when you don't let other people speak. And then when you take credit for things that you have not done. I mean, one thing is to not give credit to other people for what you have done or for what the team has done. And one is that if things have been done by other people, if the actual credit should go to other people, you take credit for your own self. Of course, this is also not correct. And another thing that is against humility, I would say, is that when you wait for the other person to greet you. See, what happens is when you meet people, you expect the other person to greet you first, because this somehow makes you happy. Well, I'm being greeted first. But I think humility demands this. It is in line with humility that whenever you meet a person, if you have to stick out your hand, if you have to say assalamu alaikum, if you have to say hello, or whatever greeting that you would like to make, don't wait for the other person. Do it yourself first. And when we start waiting for the other person, this especially happens when you meet people who are younger to you or lesser in position to you. So if you want to check yourselves, then this should not be the case. Take the initiative in greeting other people. Okay, in a similar way, there is this thing in which we speak in an accent. You see, this is especially true of a language. I would say certain developing countries, like for example, if I talk about my own country, Pakistan, or certain other South Asian countries, because they have been under the rule of the Englishman. Britain has been ruling this part of the world. We have the French and the Spanish again ruling some other parts of the world, and at times their dominant culture makes people think that if they speak their language, then this is something which will elevate them. So to speak a language in a particular extent, just to show off that you are a person who would be willing to speak the language of others in spite of the fact that you are not one of them, at times this tendency should be checked. Not thanking God enough. This also to me is something which seems to be against humility. You see, thanking God as much as possible every day, every single time that you have free. Think of the favors that He has done for us. I think this is another thing that we must make a habit of. If you're not thanking God enough, if you're not acknowledging the favors that we are enjoying, this is something that we need to make up. Similarly, when we show off our piety and virtue. So one thing is to boast about our achievements, and another thing is to boast about our virtues. For example, if we have spent something on the needy or the underprivileged, or we have done a good deed, so we brag about these pious deeds, which of course is not a very good thing to do. One thing that sometimes catches me is that when you have a lot of your self-portraits flashing all over the house. I mean, I once went to visit someone and I found a portrait of that person in almost every room. And whichever room I went, I saw the same head of the family or the person who was looking after the house in a different pose, a picture in each room. Of course, this is a very subtle thing, but it does speak that you would like yourself to be noticed as much as possible, and you have a portrait of yourself and not a small portrait. It's like a huge portrait in every room. Again, this might be something that we might look into. And then I think not admitting our faults, again, is something which is against humility. We have to accept faults. If we do something wrong, it is part of our correction that we must do. We have to have that courage to accept faults, to take responsibility of our faults, I think. So that is something that we also must do. And then, of course, the list could be extended to other things as well. But yes, this is something that we have to be careful about. Okay, now let's go on to the next set of the next part of the question. So the next part that you can see is that suggest practical ways to become humble. So any suggestions that you can practically give. I think I just remembered something which I just mentioned in just a while ago, that there is at least one thing which can make ourselves, go through a practical routine in which we can make ourselves humble. So any practical suggestions that come to your mind regarding how we can inculcate this humility in ourselves?
So Zoya said to give credit to Allah's help and the privileges that you have to do a job well. For example, if you have a new edition of books that helped you perform better, it is always better to thank Allah.
Absolutely. So Zoya, that's so wonderful, a thing that you have said, to acknowledge the fact that a person might have done his share, but of course a lot of things depend on how God has planned them. So we do our part and God does his part, and we ascribe whatever we have achieved to God's help. This is, of course, something which is in line with humility. That's wonderful, Zoya. Thank you for that.
Manahir wrote, treating people with kindness or seeking feedback from others.
Oh, wow. Manahil, that's wonderful. So I think the suggestion that you gave is that you seek feedback from other people. Of course, this means that your near and dear people will act as mirrors to what you have done. So maybe your sister or your brother or your friend or even your parents or anyone who's close to you. So if you really tell them that, well, whenever I go wrong or whenever I do something which is not correct, you are my helper. Please don't hesitate in informing me. So that's a beautiful suggestion, I think. And well, I can only say that let's adopt it.
And then Alina wrote, treat everyone with equal respect no matter their status.
Absolutely. So irrespective of the status of a person, whether he or she is highly placed in a society or wherever she or he would be, you disregard that status. I mean, and this includes caste, color, lineage, anything which is a source of differentiation between human beings. And you look toward the fact that as far as we are concerned, all of us are human beings who have the same rights, and we have to behave as if we are part of this grand human family. So that is also good. Thank you.
Douglas Marr, please go ahead.
So I find sometimes that when I've been arrogant in the past, it's because I've focused on my successes and things I've done especially well, and have been ignoring some of the things that I might have done poorly or not quite as well as the other people around me. So I suppose, to sum it up, having a realistic and objective perspective on your own accomplishments and failures and capabilities can usually keep you humble, unless you've never made a mistake in your life. And like that, no one has never made a mistake. So yeah.
Absolutely correct. So if you keep an eye on your faults and your blemishes, that keeps you humble. And of course, as you rightly said, that if you are a person who has a success story in every period of his life or her life, then because of the fact that you've always been successful and failures have not come your way, at times this does not teach you well. But of course, there's not a single person who is not without failures. So always looking down to yourself that what you have failed to achieve or the blemishes that you possess, they keep you humble and they keep you in check. And of course, looking at other people who are superior to you in character, in conduct, which tells you that there's always a person who's better in various things than your own self, and that is how things work. So you look towards other people as far as qualities are concerned, and you look towards your own self as far as mistakes and shortcomings are concerned. So thank you, Douglas. This was a wonderful suggestion.
Mehreen said to be patient and don't get easily frustrated.
Right. So patience and not getting frustrated against, because you see what happens is that, Mehreen, you're absolutely right that humility needs a lot of patience, because you see, it's not, you cannot pose humility for long. You might be able to fake humility for some time, but to be in this position for a long time, that can only happen if you have that patience, that steadfastness in you, in which you are always looking towards other people and always encouraging other people, always pointing towards their good things, and of course downplaying their faults. So wonderful, Mehreen.
Riddle said to not make fun of other people, and Ali Qureshi said to understand that there's two sides to every argument.
All right, absolutely correct, Ali Qureshi. There are two sides of every argument, of everything, and you might be at the wrong side, and while at the same time you might not think so. So always accept the fact that we can be wrong. It's not always that we are always right. So self-righteousness is something which is very which has to be taken into account. So wonderful, thank you for that. So okay, so one thing that I suggested earlier on, I'd like to add to that as well, and that is that if whenever you meet people, try to be the first person who greets other people. If you look at if you see your younger brother or sister coming your way, don't wait for him to say hi or hello or salam. You start by saying hello or hi or salam, and of course extending your hand if it's not corona. Otherwise, it's always good to be to greet by your own words. So okay, thank you for that. So let's now move on to the last question, and that is, draw the portrait of a humble person. I mean, you see, we've just gone through a portrait which the Quran has sketched vis-a-vis humble people. So how do you imagine humble people? How would you portray a person who is humble? What are the other qualities? Because you see, humility is not something which is going to stay at one place. If you are a humble person, it will manifest in your character through various ways, and let's hear from you in this regard. I think that there are certain things maybe which the person who is humble will always, you'll always find that person. A person who is humble will always be sympathetic. A person who is humble will always be a person who is encouraging other people. A person who is humble is always a person who will accept the faults if there are, if he or she has committed these faults. He will not make fun of other people. Just see what we have just described, and the opposite of that is something which we can clearly see is a good picture of people who are humble. They will always take the initiative in greeting other people. They will never regard themselves to be superior. You will always find that humble people are the best friends that you can have. It's very easy to make friends with them because they don't have an air, they don't have a swagger in them, and it's just so easy to walk up to them and make friends with them. And this is how we can make friends with them. Okay, Douglas, you have something to say?
Yeah, I suppose it's less to do about generating an image of a model humble person and more just about a question of humility in general. So I feel like the whole dichotomy between arrogance and humility is a very distinctly Muslim or Judeo-Christian concept. From an atheistic perspective, I feel like there's sort of a middle ground in which you're not exactly humble, and yet you're not really so prideful or arrogant that you're not hurting people either. And I suppose I might refer to that as sort of a confident state. So like, for instance, with me, I don't think I walk around in a humble way. I don't think you'd look at me and say, oh, that's a God-fearing man. But I don't think you'd look at me and say that he thinks he's better than everyone else either. And I just want your opinion on how much of that nuance is sort of accepted in Islam.
Well, I think that it's a subtle thing. For starters, it's something which starts off, you see, humility starts from inside. It starts with your heart. And the way you behave from inside, the way you feel from inside, has a natural consequence when that thing manifests itself in its outer form. So if you are humble from inside, the way you would dress, the way you will walk, the way you will talk, the way you will deal with people, will have those shades in which you are not treating other people with disrespect or regarding them to be inferior to you. So I think the bottom line is that this sense of inferiority or superiority complex, I would say, it should not be there. And it should not be that you feel yourself to be a person who is uh, much superior to the other person, because you see, you simply cannot have the data, sufficient data, to regard yourself to be superior. You don't know what is inside the other person. You are at times making an estimation of that person from his appearance or from what he's doing, without realizing that he has a whole personality that you might not be knowing. So I would say that if that humility is present in your heart, and it manifests itself outwardly in a way that you are not disgracing other people, not regarding them to be inferior, then this can have various forms and various nuances.
If you'll allow, may I ask a follow-up question, or would you like to move on?
Yes, sure, you can ask a question.
So you've described having sort of the inner humility versus this inner superiority. And this is sort of semi-related to what I asked before. Sometimes I look at the Islamic and Judeo-Christian ideas of humility, the ideals of humility, and it looks less like what I would describe as being humble and more as like humiliation, like diminishing yourself.
Right.
It's
yes.
When you bow down, you are quite literally sort of, it's like a self-insult in a way.
Right.
And
right.
I feel like it's possible to be humble without sort of...
Right. So I agree with you. I agree. See, there is one thing which is called as asceticism or self-effacement or self-denial. That's not what is, I mean, I would recommend, or my understanding of religion would recommend. So, I mean, denying yourself or disrespecting yourself or diminishing yourself, as you said, is something which is, I would say, this is false humility, or this is overplaying humility. Humility should be natural. It should not be false, as is the case. We pretend to be, a lot of cases, to be humble. So it should be as natural as possible, and it should not take this tone in which you are actually even going to the extent of punishing yourself.
Okay, it sounds like we're generally in agreement on our interpretations of humility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. So let's move on. Okay, do you have something to say, Mawrid?
Dr. Saleem, there were a bunch of answers in the chat while
okay.
there was a question. Should I say them out?
Yeah, please.
So
please.
someone said, Ali Krejci said, a kind smile with a non-superior posture. Alina said, not being self-centered. Manahil said, someone who's selfless and caring, and someone who gives to charity and tries to not brag. And then Mehru said, humble people won't care much about brands or status products either. And Ali again said, humble people wouldn't bring others down to bring themselves up. And then Mehreen said, humble people shouldn't be jealous of others. They should congratulate others when they accomplish something and be happy for them.
Absolutely, this is wonderful. So I think people are more active in writing down things than speaking them, and it's their prerogative. So if they would wish to write, it's always good. But all these suggestions are well taken, and they are all valid. So I would like to thank all of you for this. Okay.
Alina has her hand raised.
Okay, Alina, go ahead.
I also think that a humble person, enjoys like the successes of other people and not only himself, and like celebrates other people.
Wow, wonderful, Alina. That's a beautiful point that you have made. That as human beings, if you're part of a family, so if another person achieves something, you don't feel jealous of that person. You actually celebrate and you actually enjoy that person's achievement, because it is as if he or she is a part of yourself. He's a part of, or she's a part of your family, this human family. So beautiful, Alina. Thank you very much for this.
No problem.
And Ali Qureshi has his hand raised as well.
Yes, Ali, go ahead.
Humble people acknowledge that they're humans too, and they're not better than anyone.
Absolutely. So they don't regard other people to be inferior or and or themselves to be superior to other people. And so therefore that is what we just discussed, that they are ones with whom you can immediately get along with. You will never find a communication gap or an obstruction between them. You'll find them to be the easiest to communicate with.
And Mehreen has your hand raised as well. Mehreen, please go ahead.
Humble people don't boast about the good things they've done.
Right. Correct. So humble people are those who actually don't take credit or don't boast them. This is something between what they have done and between God. So yes, absolutely correct. And when you boast these achievements, what happens is that you actually sacrifice that humility, and the purpose is to make yourself big in the eyes of other people, and make yourselves felt as if you are there and that you have done something big. So correct. Thank you. Okay. So if there are no further comments, I would like to finish off by again that small thing that we have been doing in the last couple of sessions, and that is, let's start off with a small quiz on humility. Everyone ready? Okay. The first question, and remember you have to answer these questions the way that they apply to you. So question number one is, the quiz is entitled is how humble you are. Okay. Around your home are photographs, mostly of your family, and this was just what I was just talking about. So around your home are photographs, mostly of your family and friends, mostly of places you have been, and mostly of yourself. The word mostly must be taken into account when you answer these questions. Of course, you can always have your pictures. There is nothing wrong to have pictures, but what the question relates to, having a abundance of such pictures, and you mostly have such pictures. So the stress is on the word mostly. Question number two, when you realize that you have been very rude to someone, you, option number one, apologize after some time after realizing your mistake. Option number two, apologize as soon as you realize it. And option number three, you never say anything. Question number three, when you meet your servant, of course, you can replace it by your attendant, or a person who is a guard or a driver, or maybe a chauffeur, or even if you don't have anyone to work for you, just think of someone who is working for you, or imagine that someone is working for you. So what will happen? You wait for the servant to say salam, which means wait for him to greet you. You take the initiative in saying salam. And option number three is you do not even reply to your servant who says salam to you. So number four, you are the captain of the team that won a big national sports tournament. In your speech, you say, I have won the cup for my team. This is option number one. Option number two is my players have helped me win this tournament. This is option number two. And option number three is our team has performed very well to win this tournament. So which of these three things would you say if you were the captain and you were making a victory speech? Question number five. You are solely responsible for the success of your company. In your speech, you say, so number one is that it was teamwork that we gained such success. Option two, you praise yourself for making this success possible. And option three is attribute your success to God's help and also praise your team. Question number six, you show up at a gathering and everyone begins to compliment your clothes or style. You turn your nose up and feel proud. Of course, turning your nose up is an expression of pride and arrogance. Number two, start explaining where you got your expensive clothes from. And option number three is you just say thank you. Question number seven, whenever you commit a sin after being overwhelmed with emotions, you, option number one, repent before God soon afterwards. Option number two, seldom repent before God. Option number three, repent before God, but only after some calamity befalls you. Option number four, repent, but do so after some time has elapsed. Question number eight, God has given you a lot of wealth. Okay, so you, option number one, often boast about your wealth. Option two, often tell your poor relatives how rich you are. Option three, spend as much as you are able to in charity without bragging, without showing off about it. Option number four, spend as much as you are able to in charity without telling anyone. So question number 9. Other people tend to regard you as, so now the opinion of other people is being discussed. Option number 1, very humble. Option number 2, slightly conceited. Conceited means proud, arrogant. 3, very conceited. And 4, humble. And the last question, you ridicule and make fun of people. Option 1, sometimes. Option 2, almost never. Option 3, most of the time. And option 4, whenever you get the chance. So, please go ahead.
Dr. Saleem, for the first question, there's some confusion because what if you don't have paintings in your house?
So you just imagine that. For example, if you're living in a house and you are maybe you are the lady of the house, or you could be the man of the house, and you have it's up to you to hang those pictures, and you are hanging those pictures. So what would you do? So just imagine yourself in that situation. So let me give you the marking scheme. Question number 1. Option number 1 is 10 marks. Option number 2 is 2 marks. And option number 3 is a 0. Question number 2. Option 1 is 8 marks. Option 2 is 10 marks. And option 3 is a 0. Question number 3. Option 1 is 0. Option 2 is 10. And option 3 is -5. Question number 4. Option 1 is a 0, option 2 is a 0, and option 3 is 10. Question number 5. Option 1 is a 10, option 2 is a 0, and option 3 is a 10. Question number 6. Option 1 is 0, option 2 is 0, and option 3 is 10. Question number 7. Option 1 is 10, option 2 is 0, option 3 is 2, and option 4 is 4. Question number 8. Option 1 is 0, option 2 is -5, option 3 is 10, and option 4 is also 10. Question number 9. Option 1 is 10, option 2 is 0, option 3 is -5, and option 4 is 8. The last question. Option 1 is 0, option 2 is 10, option 3 is -10, and option 4 is -5. Okay, so do we have anyone scoring between 90 and 100? Again, it's not necessary to share your marks, only if you wish to. Anyone between 90 and 100?
Yep. So Bassam got 98, Mehreen got 96, Alina got 90. I also got 90.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you are super humble people, the 4 of you. So between 80 and 90?
Between 80 and 90. Not yet so far. Ali Quraish also got 90.
Wonderful. And
Amir Khan got 88.
Okay, that's very good as well. Okay, between 70 and 80.
Faizan got 75. Ansa got 78.
That's pretty good also. Okay, and between 60 and 70? Fine. Just remember that if any one of you has scored below 60, then some extra effort has to be made. This means that either advertently or inadvertently, there is some element of conceit and arrogance which is present, and that has to be checked. Remember, humility it stands at the pinnacle of human values. It makes a person feel human. So please work hard on this. If you find that you can improve upon yourselves, it's excellent. And I really feel happy that many of you have scored between 90 and 100, because this shows how good a human being you are. My prayers for all of you, and of course the rest of you. So inshallah, we'll see each other next week with another topic this time. And unless there are some questions that you might be having regarding the content that we studied today. Yes, please go on, Mariam.
So I had a question. I was thinking, like, nowadays, instead of having portraits, a lot of people take a lot of their personal pictures or like selfies and put them on Instagram or these kind of platforms. Would you say that that's not being humble? Because some people just solely post so many of their pictures.
I think that's a different thing. You are talking about social media?
Yeah.
I think that's an entirely different thing because social media is a platform which is meant for at times picture sharing. So I think should be different standards for that. Whereas your own home, I mean, when you're living, that's not a social forum. It's not a social media sort of a thing. But when you're splashing your picture or your photograph in every room, that does speak something of your personality. So I would make a distinction between a home and any social media platform. Okay, thank you very much, all of you. So inshallah, see you next Saturday at the same time. Enjoy yourselves and be kind to each other. Be happy, and inshallah, we'll see each other next week. Khuda Hafiz and goodbye.